Hey, Inspired Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. It's John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is Wednesday, June 25th, 2025, out of the matrix into prime reality. This is what we're going to do literally today. I mean, every show, but literally today, because it is first and foremost. What that means, it's a shift in perspective. With that said, I want to welcome you all on X, Rumble, and YouTube. Thank you to our wonderful moderator, Ronnie, in the live chat. She's doing an amazing job, and we're so grateful for her, and of course for all of you, and Kristin as inspired in the live chat. It is a collective creation here. All right, my friends, what I'm about to share with you today and talk about is going to be undoubtedly criticized. It's going to be highly unpopular, because no one else is going to say this. That's okay. And people are going to call me naive and maybe even stupid. And I'm absolutely willing to take all that. I don't frankly give a shit because I think it needs to be said. This is what has been on my mind in observation for many years. And when a situation arises like the one that we're seeing now, where this is a big one, if you will, for the world. You know what we've seen over the last days and weeks unfold. This situation, Iran, Israel, the United States, the entire Middle East, this this powder keg, this is far from over. We don't know, and it's hard to predict the timeline, but it is far from over. A lot of things would have to happen for this to start to slow down. You all have by now, or many of you might have seen the Chinese professor. He is this guy on YouTube that went pretty much unnoticed. A history professor, a historian, I believe a Canadian of Chinese descent, and he has been, for his students, mapping out history and based on history predicting what was going to happen. And he was pretty spot on all these things. And he's seeing more, much more to come. So that's why today's show is so important to me. I want to talk about the leaders as they present themselves to us in the world today. Not so much whether you like them, dislike them, voted for them, or not voted for them. That's not what this is about. It's not a political observation. This is something that you will be able to verify with your own logic, with your own observation, and with your own life experience. The leaders, those we can see, are trapped. And that goes for 99% of the leaders in the world today. They are trapped at all times. What do I mean by that? We think of these folks as, either we love them or we hate them. They're doing what they're supposed to do. They're doing what they promised, or they're not doing what they promised. And more often than not, they're not doing what they promised from the get-go to do. But what we don't consider is the field that they're living in. What we don't consider is what they're exposed to 24/7. We hold them, for better or worse, because of how this entire system was built. We hold these folks to standards that are, of course, much, much higher than anyone else's. But we do not consider the system that we allowed to be built, that they have to exist in. And I'm not going to paint them as victims. I just want everyone to consider this and what we can do about it. This is all about empowerment. So here's what we're actually looking at, okay? I want you to see this for what it is. That most leaders are trapped in a filtered reality. They're surrounded by reports and alerts and threats and agenda-driven advisors with no time for silence, intuition, or connection to deeper truth. This is the key sentence here. It doesn't matter whether it's this president or that president or the prime minister. They all exist and enter an environment that they did not create. So yes, a president gets to choose the new carpet. They get to choose how they, the color scheme of the Oval Office. They get to choose a few things that are more decorative than they are actually systemic. But the system that they step into has already been created. The information system that they step into has already been created. The hierarchy, the chain of command, the chain of information, all of this is already in place. And I can promise you that anyone who hasn't been in that field before, as soon as you step into it, you go nuts. And for the lack of a better comparison, but there were people, highly intuitive people, that had the idea that they should go to Vegas and go into a casino and use their intuition to bet on the right number, bet on the right cards, bet on the right whatever. And as soon as they stepped into the casino, 5 minutes later, they couldn't feel a thing any longer, because a casino is designed to overwhelm and overstimulate each and like every part of your brain, every part of your perception, so you don't feel intuition, so you don't feel, because they know that people have these abilities and they don't want them to have these abilities because the house needs to win. And in a very similar way, the political system and the governmental system and the information sphere there is designed in exactly the same way, that even if a leader comes in that would push against, even if a leader comes in that would try to do things different, if they can go through the entire process of getting there with their heart intact, the system around them puts them in a constant state of high stress and in a constant state of artificial information. So, in other words, observe this from your own life. If you were in a high stress situation, maybe that was in your job, maybe you were in a high level position, and office buildings and cubicles and fake lights and computer screens and emails and alerts and memos, phone calls, all of that, you can sustain creative thought in such an environment for a short period of time. You cannot sustain creative thought and creative solution processes for a longer period of time unless you have the ability and the foresight to step out of that environment. You need to step out of it. You need to leave it if you want to find a solution that is not what's already there, that is not within the scope of solutions that your advisors give you, your whatever gives you. And now I'm asking you, we have created a system where leaders put usually in the center of a city. It's already a high stress, high digital, high EMF environment. Okay, center of a city. Then they are in a highly digitized building, and we expect of them to work 24/7. Actually, it's frowned upon when they go to the beach or when they go to their home or they go and play around a golf, because then they're not working. When, if we understood really what would be conducive to the process of decision making, we would actually want them to be away as much as possible from that artificial information field. If we were, if we wanted them to really hear, feel, come up with new solutions, better solutions, creative solutions, they would have to have the ability to step out of it. And currently they don't. Currently they don't have that, and it's worse. And I will tell you that Kristin and I were part of a major election campaign many years ago, 13, 14 years ago. And we have seen the deterioration of the information field over a few short months, meaning when it's the beginning stages of a campaign, enthusiasm, inspiration, high spirits, it's all there. Everybody's fully on board. Everybody is just, let's go. We can create this change. Incredibly inspiring environment. What happens is, as campaigns and political candidates gain traction, the vultures arrive. The people that are sent out by dark forces that couldn't possibly allow for a positive movement to gain traction. And they attach themselves to candidates, to political campaigns. They volunteer or they get on a high level paid position as consultants, attorneys, whatever. And they have a specific role to fulfill, to start cluttering up the information field of the political candidate. Make sure that they're constantly whispering in his or her ear. Make sure that they're softening the candidate on positions that are against the system, and make sure that they are putting lower vibrational states in that information sphere. So they're wanting the candidates to get either more aggressive, to lash out more, to go into negative campaigning, whatever that is. It is a strategy. Those people are being put in those environments. We've seen it to an extent where it almost made me throw up. It was how bad that was. And how a wonderful man with a beautiful heart that is to this day one of our favorite people in the world was put in such a high stress situation, and the guys built a massive worldwide corporation, massive, was put in such a high stress environment that you could see it physically. You could see the effects on the body. You could see threats against his family, how that affected his spirit. You could see what happens there. And that was all before election time. So now I want you to imagine what happens once somebody is put or gets into that position. And once again, I'm not painting them as victims. I'm trying to explain what environment they're in and what we can do about it, because we can do something about it. It's the exponential solution here. So then once they're in that field, they don't get to freely pick their advisors. They don't get to freely pick their team. It's not like they just put the dream team together. No. It's all political. Everybody wants to have somebody in there. Everybody wants to have someone, a specific person in this and that position. And these folks all come with agendas. Each and every one of them has agendas. Whose agendas? We usually don't know. We can sort of see it, but we don't know. Then they have their, the National Security Council. They have their generals and everybody else their job is military strategy, defense strategy, offense strategy. So now, rather than being able to think creatively about the problems at hand, they are getting 4, 5, 6 different solutions that are already prepackaged, that have already gone through the system, the filtration system, that have already gone through the chain of command, that are all part of systemic solutions. None of these solutions usually are asymmetrical. They're usually within the confines of the system as it exists today, to maintain the system as it exists today. And if a leader does not get the chance to step into silent spaces, to step into nature for a little bit of time, or even better to go into their home environment, maybe into a garden that they helped create or at least help design, which is the natural environment that would allow them to hear higher perspectives as much as possible, where they would actually receive the benefit of prayer or meditation. The longer that a leader is in position, the less this tends to happen by design. So this is a given. This is a fact. So this is what the high priests back in the day designed for the pharaohs. That's how they designed. The high priests ruled over the pharaohs from the background by creating an environment that shaped the pharaohs. It's much easier if you let the sum of all factors shape the leader than if you try to tell him what to do, because human beings reject being told what to do. But when it is a culmination of voices and suggestions over and over and over again every single day, alerts, memos, emails, texts, everything, they just bathe in that energy field. They bathe in that information field, and they become, sooner or later, a product of that information field. And that's why so often it is that positions change drastically, positions that were held honestly and promises that were made even honestly, something that somebody really believed in, and that is being softened over time to adjust to what the system needs to happen. This is the feedback loop trap. And then you have the amygdala, but it's part of the brain, the amygdala hijack, where so many emergency situations and so many alerts are pushed out to a leader that their brain continues to react from fight or flight mode. Because in a position of leadership of a big nation, there are many things that look like fight or flight emergencies in any given day. So constantly the brain's getting bombarded with these messages, and it reacts in certain ways that start to wear the brain down, wear the analytical spheres down, and heighten the emotional responses. It is anyone who's been in a high stress environment for longer periods of time knows this. After a certain period, you become the victim of that environment. Your brain adjusts, you become more irritable. It shows in your face, it shows in your physique, it shows in your decisions, in your communication. You have a shorter fuse. Those are all effects of high stress environments. And regular people, even if it hurts their business, but they usually can step out of those high stress environments. If they want to, they say, well, I might lose business here, but I can step out of it for a few days and breathe. Presidents and prime ministers, by design, don't get that chance. Very rarely. And even if they do and go to their whatever places that are designed for that, the information sphere still keeps kicking. It needs to. It wants to. It needs to keep. And this is an interesting thing. We also realized during our participation in that campaign that I mentioned earlier, that there were three of us that had a completely different outlook than the rest of the campaign team. So we weren't going with the systemic usual crap. We were going into asymmetrical solutions. Now, the candidate enjoyed spending time with us and discussing it because it was stimulating to all of us, right? As soon as the advisors and the vultures around the candidate realized this, they kept us away. They put a buffer between us and the candidate. Physically, always keep enough space. Never let us alone in a room. This is strategy. This is what's happening to the leaders as we speak. This is happening to the leaders. They can see it to a certain degree themselves, but there's only so much they can do about it because of how the structure is created. They are swimming in a literal field that holds these energies: fear, blame, worship, manipulation. So it's not just that they're being bombarded with fear. On the other hand, they're being bombarded with constant flattery and a level of worship, right? Where their people around them are the yes men or the yes women, right? That someone will put ideas in a leader's ear in a way that the leader thinks it's their idea. And then there are the yes men who confirm, and that is an energetic feedback and containment loop. Like I said, we've observed this many times. What has very little room there is truth, real reflection, or love. This is a cesspool. So anyone who's ever been in the political field, whatever you think how bad it is, it's worse. However low you think that the vultures are on the consciousness scale, they are lower. They're going into the negative. And that is how the field was created. So real love has an extremely hard time surviving in those fields. And you can see it with candidates that come in full of loving hearts, but once they go through the ringer and the system, the vast majority lose that connection. And it's easy to blame them and fault them if you don't understand what is happening and how this system works and operates. So Here we get to the part of what we can do, because we currently have no influence over where these leaders are going, what information fields they're getting. But if we make the assumption that our collective intentions, individual, of course, first, and collective intentions can shape the field, we can actually imagine and create fields around those leaders. Now, you're going to say to me, John, why would I do that? I hate the guy. I hate that person, or I think they're horrible. They're part of the cabal. They're part of the club. Whoever you were talking about, this is what most people think. And I'm not trying to tell you you're wrong or you're right here. This is not what this is about. We're facing the potential for escalation, planned for a very long time, the potential for escalation that would affect most people in the world and a lot of people significantly negatively. Okay, so we're facing that. We're facing that very real scenario that things might not be containable for a very long period of time. And recent history shows us this. Please don't forget, in Iraq, 3 million people died. And how many soldiers died? How many soldiers came back and committed suicide? How many families were destroyed because of the post-traumatic stress that these folks experience? How much was destroyed because of these wars? Not just directly a country, a nation, and the people that were killed there, but the broader effects, Afghanistan, and the other slightly smaller conflicts of the last decades had tremendous negative effects on many people and families, either directly or indirectly. So let's not minimize the tremendously horrible effects of war that trickle out, not just to people who are directly involved. So we're facing this very real scenario that this could become a longer campaign. Why are we facing this? Because there is a tremendously narrow bandwidth of solutions on the table. The same narrow solutions that have been used throughout history for centuries and millennia. Always the same, because it's the same hierarchies, bloodline structures that from behind the scenes are pulling the strings here. Always have. The only asymmetrical, the only real counter strategy is intentional creation of consciousness fields. And that's the only thing, the best thing that we have control over, that we can actually do. So when people say, I don't want to pray for that leader because I think he's a bad guy, take a higher perspective just for a moment. Transcend your opinion, transcend your human observation, transcend that judgment just for a moment, and think of what could be most effective at this moment in time. If we can create a field that is more peaceful, that is more harmonious around these leaders and situations, this field will affect them. There's nothing they can do. It will affect them. I'm not saying it will, it's not like, oh, we're going to do a couple group meditations and all of this is over. But do not forget that this was actually tried and proven many times over. Do not forget the Washington experiment. Washington, D.C., 1993, the Maharishi effect. Transcendental meditators went to Washington, D.C. in the height of summer, where you have the height of the crime wave, and all they did was practice transcendental meditation together for weeks, and the crime rate went down unlike anything they've ever seen before on average, where you had no other explanation. And they showed it. They went into Lebanon in the 80s and did the same thing in a war zone, and conflict ceased for the time that they were doing. Literally, it came down. It came to ceasefires and they stopped fighting. This is the power of a peace field. We do not necessarily have to be present physically. Quantum association and quantum entanglement allow us to focus on a specific person to focus on a specific geographic area or an object. And this is how the FLFE principle works, by the way. You know, we've talked about this a lot. We can focus consciously and intentionally, and we affect that field. Now, the only thing that we do is we don't put specific thoughts into anyone's head. We don't go into the sovereign terrain of a human being. All we do is create a field of love, unconditional love, harmony, and peace. Whom could that harm? Like, how could that be harmful? How could that be wrong? How could that be bad? The solutions to the world's greatest problems were always going to be asymmetrical. They were always going to be challenging to accept that it is not the fight that's going to get us through this and beyond this, that it's not more war or warring against the warmongers. None of this works. How did the war on drugs work? Whenever you wage war with something, it's going to be the clash. Sometimes in our personal lives and maybe in our collective lives, sometimes you do not have a different choice but to defend yourself with physical ways to end the violence that is being brought to you. I get that. But we're talking about transcending a program that's been in our realm, that's been in the world, that's been in governments, that's been in nations for eons. And the only thing that can do that is consciousness. I mean, it is that. And of course, each action that we take coming from a higher place of consciousness. Like I always say, it matters what you do, but what matters most is who you are while you're doing it. And so if we can step out high enough and see that these leaders are trapped in energetic and information fields that were designed to trap them, that were designed to manipulate them in the way that I just described, it doesn't take away their responsibility. It doesn't take away their human responsibility for their choices. No. But we have to comprehend just how strong those fields are. And how we can see it is that it doesn't matter who comes in. At the end, the train still rolls in the same direction. And that is the program. That's the field. That's not the individual leader doing that. That's the field directing the leader in the same direction. So the field, the program, is the key. So it's up to us, all of us, to shift the field and the program and to not go into a state of despair and helplessness and hopelessness. And I'll end with this before we go into a little bit of an open Q&A if you want to ask some questions. This Chinese professor that I mentioned in the beginning, you might have seen him. He's a guy that, like I said, who's mapped out this whole thing about Iran and Israel and the United States, the interest group, Saudi Arabia, why this is happening, how this is happening. He was very accurate. But people post his clips and they're being shared and watched by millions and millions about his accuracy on the war trajectory. What they didn't share is a message of him that I shared yesterday, is where he said that the greatest minds in history have all realized that the greatest power in the universe is our ability to imagine, to envision, and the love that we put in such a vision. And that in the times of greatest despair and hopelessness, that it is the individual, any individual, that can shine their light, that can guide and lead others out of the darkness, that is the greatest power in the greatest force in the universe, and that is what will lead and guide humanity out of this situation. That's the most powerful message the guy shared. All of the other stuff is incredibly impressive, thinking about how you interpret all the data that you get and can map it out so clearly, but this is the biggest message. This is the most important one. And that's coming from a psychohistorian, not psycho as in psychopath, but that's what it's called, psychohistory, to to combine these fields and then interpret data that way. So, and this is the message that when things get really loud, when the noise is at an all-time high, and when you are so seduced to pick a side and pick a team and hate the other team, it's when you got to step out and say, I'm walking off the field here. Let's bring all people in. We have to realize we have to bring all people into that space of love, into that space of higher consciousness. All right, my friends, including the leaders. Let's start there. They are the people's leaders. The people went to the ballot box. They voted. Whatever you think of that process, but they did it. They decided on it, and this is where we are, and this is what we can do. If you have any questions, please put them in all caps. Anything. It doesn't have to be related to the subject, and we'll do a little bit of a Q&A. Yelena Kakusi. Yelena is asking, I think she's tuning in from Bosnia. Do you think that the fake alien invasion is the next card? Well, this has been played many, many times, but so the fake alien invasion has sort of two major components to it, as to maybe two, maybe more, but two major how it could play out. Either fake alien invasion being hostile, which would mean the messaging would be immediately all conflicts on Earth cease to exist, all quarrels, all wars, and all nations come together as one to defend against the outside threat. That would be the unifying global world order card. The other one would be a friendly invasion, which would ultimately probably lead to the same ultimate goal, but come through help and support, technology, open contact, and whatnot. It's impossible to predict when or if this will be played, but it's been mapped out. It's been planned out for sure. I have a friend who will soon have access to a Nicola Tesla plasma-based therapy machine. She wants to get me on it to help me. Do you have any thoughts? No, because without having any background info on over the years and decades, we've been invited to learn more from inventors. We've seen some incredible things, and some things that look amazing turn out to be harmful in the long run, and some things that are underestimated help a great deal. So far, on the technology end of things, that there's only one thing that we have been recommending and loving because we did such a deep dive on it, and that is FLFE. So that's not giving any judgment on what you talk about here, but if it truly is plasma based, that's going in the exactly right direction, right? Plasma is, we're learning and remembering this is all plasma based. So that which taps into that truth is, generally speaking, going in the right direction. That's all I can say. Scorpio, that is Karin from Afghanistan, which we're so honored that you guys tune in from all over the world. What an honor. She's asking, when is David Icke coming back? David is, he's been beating the pavement for years and decades, and done hundreds and thousands of interviews and writing books. And so, the beauty is whenever we ask him to come on, he's agreeing to it. But we also want to honor, the guy needs some time and space to write his next book and help us expand into new spheres of thinking. So we'll have him back on. There's just no timeline right now. Great questions, guys. Adding to Scorpio's question, when will Isabella, I think Isabella Green, be back on? I would so love for you to have them both on at the same time if it was at all possible. Well, they know each other. They've been on shows together. And Isabella, we're in constant or regular contact, I should say, and she will definitely have her back on too. But they're all working their projects, they're teaching, they're helping, they're writing books, and so they all honor the process, and so do we. But yeah, we'll have them back on, maybe even together. Thank you for the suggestion. Kathy, thank you so much for your contribution. Really appreciate it. Do we have a way to communicate before the retreat? We're talking about the After Awakening retreat. So if you sign up for the After Awakening retreat, which Kristin and I are hosting on July 12th and 13th, then online. It's an online retreat on the interwebs. If you sign up, then you will receive a welcome email. We'll give you all the information, including access to a dedicated Telegram group that will it will be there for forever for anyone who's part of the retreat.
And people are already chatting with
and people are already chatting in there. So there is a way to communicate. It's through that Telegram group. We've done that in the past with retreats, and it has created great communities, friendships, people doing all kinds of stuff together, projects, permaculture projects, businesses, you name it. So yeah, anyone who signs up will get access to that.
Hold on.
Holding. Yes, he does. Does John know anything about the maritime law of the sea legal system we still operate under, and how we're trapped into it by the birth certificate? Yes. My wife will tell you that she had to pull me out of all the law dictionaries, of all the statutory maritime law books, and I was in it for years and years. The ins and outs, where it started, how it happened, how it works, and there's thankfully now so much information out there. There wasn't back then, but now there is. And the fundamental principle here is that a human being, flesh, bones, spirit, is not by birth or nature part of a artificial legal statutory law system, a legal system, I should say. That law of the land, for example, or common law, are those very fundamental principles of do no harm, don't harm anyone or their property. Basically, that's it. And that man was seduced and deceived into entering this statutory maritime legal system through the birth certificate as an adapter that connected the living man to a fundamentally dead system. That's sort of all of it in a nutshell. And although there wasn't a specific question in here other than do I know it, I do know it. The fundamental solution, after thousands and thousands of hours of seminars of us teaching this stuff, going out there, is a spiritual one, like always. This is between you and the creator / creation. If you know who you are and you energetically detach from the tentacles, in practical application, in some way, shape, or form, the system will try to get to you. Maybe subtler, maybe more directly, but as long as you know who you are, you don't become a victim to it. You don't become its victim or its prey. And that's the most fundamental perspective on this one. Yeah, Jeff, we've had Jeff on before, and I have spoken at an Acapulco. Jeff's big yearly event down in Acapulco. So yeah, we're going to dive a little bit more into it. I haven't talked to him in a while, but yeah, Jeff Berwick, Max Egan, they're good friends. We've had Max on many times, and yeah, we're going to bring him back on. Yeah, good question too. Kathy's a dear friend. Christine and Kathy are talking a lot. And we've had Kathy on plenty of times too. And yeah, also very good suggestion to have her back on to, bring back the focus on the work that she's doing. She was just out in Cali, in California, with our dear friend Christiane Northrup and other wonderful people who were hosting a fundraiser for a operation to serve the victims of the ritualistic abuse and trafficking, and they raised a ton of money, and it's good people involved in the project. We know most of them pretty well. So yeah, we're going to have her back on, have her talk about it. Is the consciousness field built by prayer and meditation? Can it be interrupted by chemtrails? So there are, I think there are hierarchical principles in energy and frequency. So if you look at the scale of consciousness, the cone, it's a cone that was developed by David Hawkins. So it's a logarithmic principle, meaning the lower the consciousness, the less it affects the field. Now, the way that this lower form does it is by just infecting as many individuals as possible and just having an amplification effect. But the higher up that an individual is on the scale of consciousness and their actions and thoughts and feelings are, the more exponential their reach into the field is and their effect on the field is. So love, gratitude, appreciation, beauty, those kinds of joy, those kinds of authentic feelings have a much greater power than those lower on the spectrum. So in that sense, the higher the intention, and if you create a field consciously, imagine it, a field of healing, of peace, of love around something or someone, that in and of itself has more power than a lower field. But then we have to take into effect that those lower fields, and they have been doing this, they've cultivated this over many years, so we have some catching up to do, but the principle stands that a higher field is much more powerful. Do you think the war with Iran will continue, and do you think the USA will come back to Afghanistan? I would actually point you to, if you want the patterns that are likely to play out if nothing changes, then I would encourage you to watch the Chinese professor, and I would love to tell you his name, but I can't pronounce it. It's like, but it's Predictive History on YouTube. Predictive History, and his latest video from this morning is actually very interesting. It's getting a lot of traction too on this. So there are multiple interests with Iran, and the big ones, according to him, are Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the United States. And on some fronts, these nations are aligned, but in the long run, it's sort of like right now, my enemy's enemy is my friend, but in the long run, my enemy's enemy is going to be my enemy again. So they need and want for certain changes to happen, and they've wanted that for many decades. So until those changes happen, I don't see how there would be peace and quiet. Now, there are ways for these changes to happen without all-out war, and that's why this show even started today, why I wanted to talk about this. But this is not over. This is not over until there is a fundamental change, I think, specifically in Iran. And however that change is being brought upon is going to determine that. So no, I don't think it's over, but I also don't think it has to be all out war. And just to come to that, strategically speaking, from a geography standpoint, that I don't see how Afghanistan wouldn't be a part of it, at least strategically, could be a part of it. I should say that, but I would think that in some ways it would be a part of it. Laurie says, in a previous video, you mentioned that you believe that at one time we were in a perfectly beautiful world, Earth. My question is, how do you see that fact that we now have mosquitoes or fleas? Well, you know, think about our changes. You know, we are not inherently a parasitic race, but our behaviors are parasitic towards the earth, right? So to the earth, we're also fleas and ticks and mosquitoes. If you think about the earth, the true earth, the real earth as a living organism. So maybe the way that we see things today and the way that we interpret the existence and behavior, for example, of animals or insects, is just colored very strongly of our current perception of ourselves and the earth. But maybe if we were to see the state of harmony and bliss, then they would fulfill a different role. But just like we have changed, everything around us has changed. The behavior of animals has changed. So, not to say this is a definitive answer, but I would think it's a perspective to take. So that's what I've been thinking a lot is, have animals always been this way? No, I don't think so. And I think that the strongest or the highest form of consciousness in any field, so on Earth, humans would be most likely, could be some other beings that I don't know of, but most likely we are the highest form of consciousness. So who we are and how we behave and what we do affects all lower forms of consciousness more than anything else. So when we reharmonize, the theory is that everything around us has to start reharmonizing too, including the animals, the insects, nature, everything. And I strongly believe that to be true. Have you and Kristin talked on Honey Talks about urine therapy? Yes, we did, I think, 2 or 3 shows. Maybe I missed it, but would like to know about how it can affect the nano crap they are spewing on us and if this can heal via stem cells. So Dr. Group, and Deb, I don't know if you've seen that one, but Dr. Group and I had a conversation. He talked about this specifically, what you address here. And that interview is, just search for Dr. Group Inspired on Rumble. It's the entire interview's there. We couldn't post it here. And Kristin and I did a number of conversations. So if you go to locals and search for Honey Talks urine, that's two things you usually don't put in a sentence, then you should find that information. But Dr. Group and his team are going to be your best resource, I think, on this. How many hours duration for each day of the retreat, and what activities etc are on the itinerary? So first question is going to be about 4 hours and a day, and we don't hold us fully to it. We have to be a little flexible. And the second thing is we never put out an itinerary. The biggest part of the success of these retreats, and we've done them in different forums, is that there's a momentum of surprise and stepping outside of the comfort zone. If you already know what's happening exactly and what's coming, that doesn't help with this process. So, but what I will tell you is it's going to be expansive. It's going to be meditative. We're going to go deep into some powerful processes. And most importantly, it's going to be things that people can do after the retreat and continue doing to shift. This has always been, it has to be repeatable, doable, and easy for folks to do it. And Kristin and I have worked with this for many years. She's worked with this for decades with her clients. These are tried and proven things that work. And that's what we love. So, kind of piggybacking off this question here, if you feel inspired to join us, if after awakening this entire idea speaks to you, that many people experience some very, very challenging times and even darkness after awakening, and what this retreat is about, to honor that space first, not to condemn it, but to honor it, to honor the journey that everybody's on, to say right off the bat, nothing's wrong with you. This is a very natural and common reaction. However, it doesn't have to stay this way. It doesn't have to be your new normal, your new reality. Understanding yourself better, knowing why this is happening, what this is perhaps telling you, and what you can do to gently or more impactfully shift your energy. This is what we're going to do during the 2 days. So if that speaks to you or you want to learn more, please go to afterawakeningretreat.com and let's see if we won't see you there on July 12th and 13th. All right, my friends. Please bookmark this show. Go back to what we talked about in the first half. Share this with your friends and family. Kristin and I have been in the solution finding field for decades now. We've been part of...
Please, somebody, I think, misunderstood that.
Pardon me?
She said that you said expensive, but you said expansive. So
no, I'm sorry. I'm not embarrassed to say that I said it will be expansive. EXPANSIVE. Expansive, as in we are expanding. No embarrassment here, because expansion is the principle of raising consciousness. So yeah. But now back to wrapping this up here. We have been part of groups, tanks, organizations, in terms of we participating in projects that are worthwhile, that change something, that help shift towards the positive, whether that's in permaculture, whether that was in eliminating trafficking, human trafficking, whether that is in the legal and law field. I mean, and that's what we've been doing for a couple decades now. But the one fundamental thing that we come back to that connects everything is that we see this over and over again. The initiatives, the things that function, that work, the groups that are successful, that are creating something that's actually shifting things. These are people that come from a higher place of consciousness in their work. And that is what connects everything. That's why this subject is so close to our hearts, because unless we approach whatever we do from a higher level of being, from a higher level of thinking, from a higher level of feeling, from a higher level of creating, we will not shift the fundamentals in the field. We will just shift problems from one end to the other. And raising consciousness and actively working in the field and affecting the field around us, the people around us, their decisions with our love, with our peace, is the most powerful thing that we can do. I know that. I know that. And that's why this is so close to our hearts. All right, friends. Thank you again. We love you. We appreciate you. And we will be back with you again very, very soon. Your environment shapes everything, your thoughts, your health, your energy. But most people never question the invisible field they live in. We did, and that's when FLFE found us. It's not a product, it's a field of pure life force energy that lifts everything it touches. We now live in it 24/7, and we would love to invite you to experience it too. Start your free 15-day trial now. No pressure, no strings attached. Just the truth, resonance, and peace.